What's up, everybody? It's Hey Eric, HeyEric.com, just recording podcast 11. And I got a few things I wanted to go over today. Last week it was a week ago today actually, I went and saw Dave Chappelle. He came to Salt Lake City and it was a lot of fun. Dave Chappelle was a comedian I guess I grew up with. I'd never seen him before and I was super excited to do that. So, and I posted about it actually on Facebook the day we were going because I was so excited. And it turned out great. I don't know, he had some funny openers. Obviously with his shows, I don't know if you're aware of this, but you actually put your cell phone into this like magnetic case because there's no cell phones allowed. Somehow somebody got their cell phone out and was filming him while he was performing, and that really pissed him off. But hecklers, there was, I guess you'd call them hecklers, I don't know. There was definitely a bunch of people who, were just yelling and interrupting him. Not that they were saying anything horrible, like a heckler I think would say, but just interrupting him. Like he was there to perform a show, and I just, and people pay to go see him, right? They spend money on a ticket, and then when they're there, they just were yelling and shouting and interrupting him from way up in the bleachers, and I don't get it. Like why do you pay to go see someone perform that you like and then heckle them? Maybe do it on purpose. Maybe you don't like him. Maybe that's part of the reason. But I just didn't understand it. And I was there, as a first time show goer. I don't go see comedy shows almost ever, but it was still a lot of fun. And my friend, he actually messaged me saying, he on some message board he was reading, he said, yeah, he probably cut it short because of the interruptions and stuff. But it just makes me reflect on what are you doing to other people by interrupting them, even with like one-on-one conversations, which I am notoriously bad for this, I'll admit it. When I'm talking to someone, I'll cut them off, and I've been trying to get better at this. It's something I realize I do. Luckily I wasn't doing that to Dave Chappelle because it's super inappropriate, but it's also inappropriate to do it to your friends. So that's what came to mind when I was thinking about that. It's just like, stop interrupting people, Eric. Stop, thinking your thing to say is more important than their thing to say, because it's not. It's not. A conversation's a two-way street at all times. So don't overpower someone. Don't yell or heckle. Just something that came to my mind. But aside from that, that was a lot of fun. This last weekend, I actually had a new listing that came out. It was one in North Salt Lake in Foxborough, and I posted about that open house also. So just to understand where the market's at. So, a couple months ago, before rates rose, December and January were super busy in the real estate market. Now we're in April. This listing, $450,000 price point, a lot of times that would have a lot of traction at an open house. And it did. It had a good amount of traction. Not as busy as I would have expected for that price point in that neighborhood. But, we had probably about 10 families through. Which is good. Typically with 10 groups going through, you're going to find a buyer. And we had, there was an investor that was interested in it, which, from an investment side, I don't know if it's the best. Obviously, it's good because it's newer, so there's not a lot of deferred maintenance. But, in the end, a family got it under contract. I'm super excited for them. And we got a great offer. From the seller's perspective, it's a great offer. The buyers are definitely committed. So super excited for him because now my client, needs to go out and start shopping for a home. And we did that open house on Saturday, and then Saturday afternoon and Sunday we went and looked for homes for him. Wrote 2 offers. One of them didn't get accepted. It's a house at a higher price point in a different neighborhood. That one, before we wrote an offer, already had 6 offers on it. So I say that to illustrate that the market is different in different areas with different price points. It's so important to be very specific when talking to other agents about the listing, what causes the multiple offer situation, because I would have expected more offers on our listing than we got, and on the one we wrote an offer for, it was a beautiful home, don't get me wrong, but it was definitely a higher price point, and it had quite a few offers, and we weren't the best one. But aside from that, we also submitted on this other offer, and working with a brokerage on the other side of the transaction doesn't communicate very well. Drives me insane. We submitted that Monday morning, now this is Tuesday evening, still don't have a response, a few texts here and there. Like I say all the time, communication is key, especially between a listing agent and a buyer's agent, to help, get things under contract, move them to the finish line, help people make this decision in their life. And I am just out of words for the communication I've been dealing with, trying to just get a counter offer back or get something back from this other brokerage. But so is life. And it's okay. I'm not going to be able to change that person. I'm just trying to present our offer, my client, in the best light possible so they think and feel safe with choosing our offer, because that's my job representing this buyer. But yeah, another thing, rates. Rates are floating around 5%, 5.1. They've been there for probably the last week or two. The Fed has indicated that they're going to be doing another at least 25 basis point increase early next month. Some people have been saying 50 basis points, so that's 0.5%. So will that affect it? I personally think that mortgage interest rates, they rose super fast the last 3 to 4 weeks. So I think mortgage interest rates have already priced in some of that future basis point Fed funds rate rise, personally. So when I think and this is just my opinion, if the Fed raises the rates another 25 basis points, I don't think that's going to have a huge effect on what mortgage rates do, because I think it's already priced in. I think there'll be an initial shock. Maybe they bump up a little bit, but I think they're still going to settle in around 5.1 to 5.25 personally. But we'll see. I'm happy to be wrong. I'm happy to be right. So, when that does happen, I think it's May 6th is when the Fed's meeting, somewhere around there. I'll let you know if I was right or wrong, because it's okay. Either way, 5.25 still good. But right before the pandemic, they were sitting at 5 or 5.1. So just to put that in perspective. The other thing, people are still talking about a recession. Holy cow. I got off the phone with someone last week, and recession. Just to put that in perspective, so when people think about a recession, they think about 2009, which is what we have labeled the Great Recession. There was also a recession, the dot-com bubble was a recession. There was also the pandemic was a recession. So a recession is defined by 2 consecutive quarters of negative GDP or negative GDP growth, one of those. So when the pandemic started and everything shut down, services shut down. So services are a huge part of GDP, which is gross domestic product here in the United States. So when services shut down, being restaurants, entertainment, bars, ski resorts, all of that took a huge negative effect on our GDP, which is why the Fed did the big stimulus package, more quantitative easing, lower interest rates, more money supply. And so that happened at the beginning of the pandemic. So the pandemic kind of started probably around early March. So probably Q2 and Q3, we had a recession because it was 2 consecutive quarters. And if you look back, more than the uncertainty about the pandemic, from the recession side of things, the federal government did a ton to help stabilize those companies with the quantitative easing to get through that, with the Paycheck Protection Plan to keep people employed to some extent. And coming out of that, now we're looking back almost 2 years from the beginning of that recession. Unemployment is at the lowest rate ever. So when we think about with these interest rate rises, is there going to be a big recession? Who was it? I think it was Goldman Sachs said 35% chance in the next 2 years. And if you spread 35% chance over 2 years, I don't think that's going to happen necessarily. The Fed's hoping for a soft landing, but I don't have some of the fears as some of the people I've spoken to, just to let you know. And when people think about recession, they think about real estate, and they're like, I better not buy a house because the market's going to crash, quote unquote crash. And during the Great Recession, that happened because it was a housing bubble, a housing crisis. During the pandemic, it was a health crisis. And say there isn't a soft landing this time, what is going to be the crisis? Is it going to be a housing bubble? No, it's going to be interest rates, which are going to slow the economy and slow purchasing and slow money flow. But is that going to really crush asset prices? I don't necessarily think so. So I still think it's, if you need to move, it's still a good time. Don't be afraid to do that. because asset prices aren't going to be crushed if there's a dip in the economy. Yeah, they'll reflect downward, but they're not going to be crushed by any means, is my opinion. So just idea. But along those lines of, recession, preparation, things like that, I've started a new book, and it's a famous book, and a lot of you have probably read it. I personally haven't. It's called Rich Dad, Poor Dad, and I'm still going through that, and wow, it's really good. I probably should have read it a long time ago. It's all about financial literacy, understanding assets and liabilities in your personal life, because, and I'm guilty of this, rather than buying more assets that are income producing, I'll waste it on liabilities that I pretend are assets, and it's just money down the drain a lot of times. I spoke to one person where they're like, when you have extra money, you save it, whether you put it into like a stock market, you just keep squirreling away that cash into some sort of asset. So when people think about assets, they think about large assets like maybe rental properties or things like that where they're income producing. But even just a stock that provides a dividend for you, which is a lot of oil and gas, some of those older, safer companies, Procter & Gamble probably does a dividend, Chevron does a dividend. Those are assets that create income for you technically. I'm not recommending any one of those, but if you have an extra $100 and you went and bought, a bunch of stocks that give you a dividend, that's an income producing asset, and you just let it sit there for the rest of your life until retirement or whenever you need it. You take that same $100 and you buy an asset called, a motorcycle that you think is going to appreciate when actually it probably depreciates, or sports cars or stuff like that, any other vehicle. Vehicles, I wouldn't call them assets. Some of them, they go up in value, but I think that is probably more luck than anything. You got the Porsche enthusiasts, that are, the Porsche is now worth $140,000 instead of $40,000, but that's a different topic that I'm not going into. But just being responsible with assets and liabilities. And when you talk about, emergencies or recessions or any of that, have an emergency fund. More than, I love real estate, but I also love finance, and I've talked about this, and I don't know if I'm beating a dead horse or repeating myself, but have an emergency fund, 3 months at least of your living expenses. So if your mortgage is $1,000 a month, you have $3,000 saved up minimum to pay that should there be an emergency. 6 months is better, a year is even better, but a minimum of 3 months of all your expenses. And even the ones that you say you'll cancel, people like, well, if there was an emergency, I would cancel my cable because it's $150 a month. Well, would you? If you're home unemployed, are you really going to cancel your cable? I'd set aside the money for your cable also, because you're probably going to want it. So all of those things, add them up. Look through what you spent on your credit card or your debit card, wherever it is. Say you typically spend $5,000 a month between your mortgage, your groceries, your entertainment, all sorts of things, fuel, gas, or whatever, those types of things. It's $5,000 a month. You better have $15,000 squirreled away somewhere in a savings account where you can access it quickly in emergencies. 6 months is always better though. I would recommend 6 months, but at least 3 months. So remember that. That's just something we all need a reminder of. And even when thinking about emergencies, like food storage, have food and water, have something, be prepared, because, when we had the earthquake when the pandemic started, that's a big conversation. You talk about Ukraine, people in Ukraine during this war, if they had food stores lined up, which a lot of Mormons there did because the church teaches that so much, it helps. I know a lot of us make fun of food stores because, we're never going to need it, but you're never going to need it until you actually need it. And if you don't have it, you can't get it. Like the toilet paper shortage of 2020, that's real life. So if you didn't have toilet paper, guess what? You were out because they didn't have any left over in the stores for us. So be prepared, get some of that food storage, make sure it's things you eat. Actually, don't buy stuff, if you don't buy wheat, if you don't know how to grind wheat and bake bread, because that was the joke when I was growing up, as a young Latter-day Saint family. Well, we got all of our cases of wheat. I don't think anyone in my family actually knew what to do with wheat. So that is not advisable. And it probably had the bugs in it anyways. I don't remember what they were, but I'm pretty sure we threw a lot of it away. but also water, things you eat regularly. So, and the way I like to do that, the way I do it personally, is when I go to either Costco or Smith's and they have like a case lot sale. I say, oh, I'm gonna get an extra case of those cans, like things we eat. We eat a lot of beans, we eat a lot of rice. We eat these microwave lentil packets from Costco that are really, really good. So all of those things, they have a long shelf life, probably a year at least, maybe even longer. And they're also things we eat regularly. So it's something that like we can use it regularly if it's expiring or going out of date. So I recommend that too. I think the church recommends, I don't know, 3 months of a food supply, maybe it was 6 months, but it's a lot. But have something. You don't want to starve. You don't want to die of thirst. They recommend 55-gallon drums of water. That can be tough to maintain. But have some water, have something, just as a recommendation. So that's what I wanted to cover today. There's a lot of crazy things going on in the world. All this, scary talk on the news and stuff. Life is still good, so cherish the good things in your life, but be prepared for the worst things. That's kind of where I'm at, with all this crazy talk I hear from people. I'm like, I get it, be ready, but do I think it's all going to happen? No, probably not, but you never know. We didn't know we were going to have an earthquake. We didn't know we were going to have a pandemic. We didn't know we were going to have, killer bees right after the pandemic that were coming to Utah. So it's a crazy world out there. Be safe. If you have any questions, hit me up. I love to chat about this stuff. And thanks for joining me.